All right, so this one is definitely a little outside the world of banjo hero, but my next banjo hero is Edward Van Halen. When I first started getting into music that was outside of bluegrass, when I started on the banjo, I don't know that I listened to much music. I heard stuff that was on the radio, but I hadn't really started learning how to play any instrument. I really didn't have much of a I hadn't really developed much musical taste. Early on, of course, when I started playing the banjo, my banjo teacher said I should listen to Earl Scruggs and J.D. Crowe and Alan Mundy, and so I did. I listened to those players, and then I learned a lot about bluegrass music. I would go to jam sessions, I would learn certain songs, I would buy the records of those artists. And as I mentioned in the Sam Bush segment of this, that listening to Sam Bush and Newgrass Revival, and also listening to Tony Trischka and some of the music that he did, I was hearing influences in their playing that was outside the world of bluegrass. And that kind of gave me permission because I thought, well, wait a minute, these guys are my heroes. They're listening to stuff that's outside of bluegrass. Maybe I could too. And I started following my own tastes, and somewhere along the line, I discovered Van Halen. So there were a lot of rock and roll bands that I listened to before Van Halen, but again, there's something about Eddie Van Halen's rhythm playing that really, really appealed to me. And I think of it almost in the same terms as I think of Sam Bush's rhythm playing, and I think of his fills, the fills that Eddie would play, almost the same as J.D. Crowe. Now, that's a weird connection to make, I know, but if you listen to Van Halen from one of their first records, the version they did of You Really Got Me, there are these little quirky guitar things that Van Halen does. You really got me. He plays these little fills that happen in those spaces, and they're just perfect. They're brilliantly timed. They're not always something particularly fancy, but they're just exactly the right moment. And again, it's the same thing that J.D. Crowe does when he's playing backup. The energy that Van Halen put into songs also made me think of the energy that Tony Trischka played in songs. There are Van Halen tunes that sound very, very sad and sentimental. There are Van Halen tunes that are just flat out plain raw energy. Some of them are just feel good rock and roll tunes, and all of them give me an emotional reaction. I hear those tunes and they just put me in a certain place. Now, of course, as a soloist, one of the things that Van Halen is best known for is the two-hand tapping thing. Now, on banjo, two-hand tapping isn't really much of a real thing, and the reason, of course, is when you're playing an acoustic banjo, you're playing with picks and it comes out nice and loud. If I try to tap on the banjo, that's all the louder it is. Now, if you have an electric banjo or a solid body electric banjo, you can get away with a little bit more of that. I have one. I didn't have it with me for this presentation, but I did want to show you a picture of it. It's a Deering Crossfire electric banjo, the model that they made standard. But as you can see, I painted it as a tribute to one of my favorite guitarists. I 5150 striped it like Van Halen. And again, just for me. I wanted to do that just for me. Now, on that, I can get away with a little more of the tapping. But I have experimented with doing some two-hand tapping on the banjo. I even recorded a tune one time that had some of that in it. It was mostly, the whole piece was made out of tapping things. But when you listen to those tapping things that Van Halen would do in a solo, they really all they are is arpeggios. He's just playing an arpeggio of a chord with one drone note. So as I play that, I can change one of the notes, or I can change one of the notes on the other. But it's still just playing, those notes fast and over again. Well, on the banjo, you do that a lot, where you play. So you play things that are sort of Van Halen-ish all the time. I remember working out a tune of my own that it was, well, I have to tell you, honestly, it wasn't until And it wasn't until I was approached to doing this Banjo Heroes that I even put these two thoughts together. But there's a tune that I wrote, and it's called Nedscape Navigator. And Nedscape Navigator, when I was thinking about tunes that might have been influential or some influence that Eddie Van Halen had on me, I thought, well, Nedscape Navigator has a lot of those elements to it. It has the drone. That resembles a little bit the two-handed tapping. And I listened to it, and then I thought about the other thing that Van Halen did in his career was he played keyboards. And of course, maybe his most famous keyboard song was one of their biggest hits, was Jump. And when I play that on the banjo, it has that same bass note just tapping along on there. So that, to me, had a little bit of the tapping sound to it. It had a little bit of the compositional approach that Van Halen would play even on the keyboards. And then, as I started analyzing it even more, when I got to the middle part of Nedscape Navigator, it even sounded more and more to me like the solo part in the song Jump. So one of my favorite tunes that I've ever written of my own, I feel like I owe entirely to Eddie Van Halen. And so the tune is called the Nedscape Navigator. It's one of my favorites that I've come up with, and I don't know, it's my tip of a hat to Eddie. Thank you, Eddie.